Hey guys, Brooke here. I'm going to take a look at this photo and kind of give you guys my thought process behind both shooting it and editing it. So let's dive in. All right, so first of all, this is Tiger out at the Wampa, and now I want to first talk about what drew me to this particular spot. It's got a lot of good things going for it. We have nice leading lines, good depth, we've got some light and color back there, we've got good rich colors, textures, all that stuff, but what we don't have is good existing ambient light. So we're going to need to bring in an external light source. I am using my bicolored video light with a softbox. You can use a flash with an umbrella, whatever you got, you're just going to need some external light. So the tricky part with a hallway is it is narrow. I am lucky in this particular situation. I've got a little alcove to use to get a little bit better of an angle, but regardless, you're going to want it to be at a slight 45-degree angle just so you can get some more interesting looking light rather than just straight on flat lighting them. All right, so because I put my light over here, I need to pose for my lighting. So what that means is I'm going to angle my subject slightly to that light. So you can see we keep the shoulders nice and open. And then when it comes to his face, instead of looking straight towards me, because that will split the light down the middle, you're gonna have him turn slightly towards it, even if his eyes are back towards you, like it is in this photo. And you can see we get some nice contouring shadows going on right there. Fabulous. All right, now let's talk about settings. And I don't mean the exact precise settings because it varies so much between your capability, your camera, the location, all that sort of thing. So what I'm going to talk about instead is just my thought process behind why I picked the settings that I picked. So like I said, I am using a video light that I can match the color temperature to. So I don't have to worry about mixing light on my subject. So here's my thought process with that in mind. So I like to see what's going on back behind my subject. I don't want a steep drop off from where like the video light hits to the background. I want there to be more depth. So I'm gonna let in as much light through my ISO as I feel comfortable with, because I also kind of like the warmer tones that start to come out when you use a higher ISO. So for those of you who don't know, the more ISO you have, the more grain you have, and the more orange tone you have in your color. So by using a slightly higher ISO, not crazy high enough that you're comfortable with, that you're not going to have weird things happen, but you'll start to bring out a little bit of that, like a little richer, oranger color. And then I'm going to select an f-stop that I feel comfortable with, that I can get both his face and his body in focus in. For me, I chose a 2.8. For you, that might be a 4.5, 5.6, whatever. I just don't want so steep of a drop off that it's like totally blurred out behind him, or like if I were to accidentally miss his face and get his chest instead, that his face would be out of focus or anything like that. But I also don't want such a high of an f-stop that like I lose that depth and everything becomes sharp. So for me, 2.8 is a great range. Now for the shutter speed, because I am using a studio light or a video light, not a flash that I'm trying to sync to, I have like free reign on my shutter speed, and that's what I'm going to use to really fluctuate my light and kind of hone it in. So I'm at 1/400. Basically, you don't want to go so slow that you get motion blur, but you can go as fast as you want, because honestly, it doesn't really matter. If you start noticing yourself going like crazy fast, like in the thousands, you might consider dropping down your ISO, because you've probably got something a little haywire in your mix there. All right, now if you were to be using flash, that's a different temperature than the existing light in the room. You do want to watch out for mixing your light. So first of all, whether you are using a gelled flash or a bicolored video light, whatever, you just want to make sure you don't want to stick your subjects directly under one of those lights, just because it's really hard to overpower, even if it's the same color temperature, overpower those shadows that occur from lights being directly overhead. So just move them out away from that sort of thing. Now, the next thing is you just want to make sure you don't want to have two different colors of light on your subject. I actually like using different temperatures of light within the same shot, especially having like that 5000 Kelvin flash on my subject, and then having those warmer tungsten lights in the background. It's a nice contrast, but you're going to have to watch out and make sure you find your balance between your internal camera settings and the light that is hitting your subject. So you want your camera settings to read probably around a 0 to -1 to make sure that when the light hits your subject, that it will in fact be the strongest light in the room. And then you just got to balance it. Make sure that you have enough light to your subject. It looks pretty well exactly how you want it to be out the gate, because if you don't nail your exposure with your flash in the moment, it's gonna get kind of weird in post, and you're never going to be able to quite recreate that same kind of light that you would have gotten from hitting it with like a little bit less or a little bit more flash. So just something to keep in mind when you're using flash. All right, so that's all there is to it. That's the thought process behind why I placed them here, the setting choices I'm making. So now let's talk about the edit. Okay, so this is just my baseline edit. I use color profiles, that way I've got free reign over all my other settings, and then I just utilize that, the tone curve, in conjunction with it to maintain a good consistent look from start to finish in my shoot. Now, I want it to be a little bit more interesting. I want to give it a little more mood. I want to get it to this point, right? So how I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna use masks. So I'm gonna do a background selection first. Boom, select your background. Perfect, okay. If you don't want this to be red or to highlight what you're showing, toggles that on and off. I am just going to lower the exposure a little bit because I'm also going to be putting in a radial gradient and I don't want it to get too dark. I'm also going to take a little bit of sharpness out of the background just to make sure he's like really popping and standing out as the sharpest thing in the room. All right, so now I've got the first mask on. It looks good, right? I'm going to sauce it up just a little bit more. Shift M. I'm going to add a radial gradient. Shift M is your quick key for a radial gradient. It'll also open this whole masking menu for you. All right, so I'm going to draw this, and you want it to have a nice feather. So I keep it around 75 to 80, whatever works for you in the scene. And I'm just going to mimic the direction of light that is already occurring in this image. And with this gradient, I am just going to do exposure and just slightly. So all I am doing is emphasizing where that light is already hitting. So you just want to make sure it's not really hitting the areas you don't want it to do, and you're just going to give it a stronger shadow right there. Voila. So let me show you that before. We'll delete these masks. And after. Ta-da! So that took like what, 30 seconds, and then you can get a lot more interesting and a lot more dynamic looking light. I like to have a good like base level to work from when I am shooting, but then I always like to add a little bit of something in post-production, and you can even use this to kind of create and shape light where maybe you did use a flat light in the moment. So it's a really cool little trick to just to give your photos a little something extra.